This week, we're going to talk extensively about integrations in the enterprise security space, including ones between Trend Micro and Wind River, Forescout and Rapid7, Ativo Network and Carbon Black, Kaspersky and Logmain. In other news, Cisco cuts its workforce. Then we get to talk to Pwnie Express CEO Paul Paget. All that and more, so stay tuned. This is a Security Weekly production. Brought to you by IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. IT Pro TV offers 1,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video training content. Course topics include certified cloud security professional, ethical hacking, cryptography, and VMware. You can stream their courses live or on demand to your mobile device, all for one low monthly subscription price and cancel at any time. Visit itpro.tv/enterprise security to upgrade your brand with the most popular IT certifications. Use the code ES30 for a free 7-day trial and save 30% off for life. Welcome, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. We're broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, and I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, and I'm joined by another Paul. Paul Paget is here in studio from Pwnie Express.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be here.
Yes, welcome to the show. And Paul likes to wear a cigar, smoking-friendly set.
That's right.
just nice. We light up our stogies, and we're going to get into some enterprise security news, and then we're going to go into a segment where you and I will talk about some of the things that Pwnie Express is into in terms of detecting rogue devices and all the cool things that you guys do. But talk about it in a general sense about, you know, kind of your own little market, I think, that you've carved out that people should pay attention to because there's a lot of risk there.
Well, we're finding that the problem is bigger than we actually thought. And Gartner recently came out with a report that said that 25% of the attacks on enterprises will come from devices, IoT, within the next 3 years.
We're seeing that trend too. So yeah,
pretty substantial attack vector.
It is.
Yeah.
We've got lots of integrations to talk about, which I love talking about integrations. I think it's some of the more interesting news in enterprise security. We've got some other stories to talk about too, so we'll dive right into it. Recently, Trend Micro and Wind River collaborated. Why does Wind River ring a bell? Do you know what Wind River is somewhat famous for, even in the security space?
Well, they're in the telco space, right?
They are, but they also make an embedded operating system called VxWorks.
Ah, okay.
And that's what they're famous for. I know H.D. Moore.
Oh, they're the VxWorks guys.
Yeah,
right.
He's famous for pointing out a lot of vulnerabilities in VxWorks. But so Wind River makes this, and I was just reading about this today. They make this, they call it Network Function Suite, Network Virtual Function, NVF. Network Virtual Function was the acronym they were using. It's basically a fancy virtualization appliance for telcos and ISPs, essentially. They've partnered with Trend Micro so that they can provide a core of network functionality or security, including intrusion prevention, URL filtering, and application control on this virtualization platform. So this is a virtualized platform with virtual security. I'm curious to see how this kind of pans out. There's a lot of virtual in this. I said, so you have a virtual network, they're applying virtual security. Is this virtually possible? Apparently it was because they made the integration.
Well, you think about it, right? The infrastructure players are starting to really worry about security, right? So that's a good sign.
Yeah, and they're definitely following this trend with that integration. So something that delves a little more into our space and some of our areas, Paul, is Forescout and Rapid7 have partnered to join forces so that, and here's what it reads, the Forescout extended module for Rapid7 Nexpose allows customers to automatically block devices from joining their network until they reach an acceptable risk level. I think this is a great goal to have, and it's some of the things that make me really excited about security today is to see products that find the bad things working with products that can stop and prevent those things from getting on the network or take them off the network in an automated fashion. And really, I think that's the future of security today. You see some of it in integrations, you see some of it in acquisitions, but this is an integration that we've seen vulnerability assessment vendors make in the past. Certainly having worked in that space, I saw my share of these types of integrations. But my thing is really, I think to do it effectively, you really need an agent on both sides almost. I don't know. Some of them have a dissolvable agent for network, for NAC. But on the vulnerability side, if I bring my laptop to an organization, the only way you're going to know if I'm vulnerable to stuff at a certain level is if you put an agent on my system to see what software I'm running, because you can't do it over the network.
Yeah, this reminds me of, you saw this over 10 years ago when universities put in NAC, and they actually forced either AV or vulnerability scans to happen. So it would take you half an hour to get on the network, right?
Right, exactly, yeah. And so I don't know exactly how this integration is going to work in production. I'm sure 10 years ago we were aware of those problems that we had where, does the agent need to be in my system? Usually there's a strategy to say, okay, if Paul brings his laptop in and he's a guest, maybe we don't make him put an agent on the system. Maybe there's a dissolvable agent from Forescout that goes on there and checks some things. But time is a factor because I just want to get on the network,
Well, if they can automate it and make it so that the security guy doesn't have to get involved to allow the contractor or whoever it is to come on the network, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And we hear this the same. We hear this in the space that we're in. When they see a device, they want to be able to scan it in some fashion. So it's a normal thing. And they don't want to get involved. They just want it to have an automated fashion. So if they can make it work, great. This is a lot to implement.
Well, and I think that if it's a system you manage and there's some heinous vulnerability and you've got an agent on that system, telling the NAC, hey, you know what? Systems that have this particular behavior or this vulnerability, just take them off the network. If it comes down to that point, is something that you could do.
Right. I mean, you're seeing this sort of move towards, we don't trust anything. So if it comes on, we're not going to just let it on. Or somebody says, let this guy plug in. And, with BYOD and anything else that comes in, people feel the right that they can plug whatever they want in. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense. I think that the command and control, traditional command and control of devices, though, is eroding because can you force all this stuff to happen? Big companies can do it. They've got the staffs. We see that smaller companies really can't.
Struggle with it. No, I agree. I was trying to look at Rapid7's product line, just some feedback for Rapid7. I'm somewhat lost in the paths that I'm taking in the product line. They do have the Insight Agent, which I believe ties to their UBA platform and ties to their vulnerability scanner, I think. I was kind of a little lost on the messaging there. But Rapid7 being friends and knowing people there, they can get me caught up to date probably pretty quickly. But I'm kind of I wish there was a better, more concrete direction when reading their website to understand how their products have changed over time. Because admittedly, it's been a little time since I've really delved in. I got a very short demo earlier this year. But it's interesting how their new capabilities can tie into this type of integration. I think that's really important. So hopefully we'll report back with some more, because I think Rapid7 is doing some really cool things in the UBA space. In fact, they were one of the first vendors I was looking at when UBA started to become more of a thing. They were doing things pretty smart. So
you see that people don't want to buy additional products. They want to see the vendors start to align, and you're seeing that alignment start to happen. A lot of times it happens through M&A, but these are big. These are both very successful companies, Forescout and Rapid7, and so it's unusual to see. Oftentimes you see them. People get together with the bigger companies, right? The big full stack players.
Smaller,
So these are sort of fast-moving mid-sized companies that are getting together. That's an interesting trend.
No, that's good. I didn't think about it that way. Usually you see a smaller guy latch onto a bigger guy.
Right,
a smaller guy wants to grow.
HP or Cisco or whatever. So,
well, speaking of Cisco, good segue, Paul. You're like an expert at this.
Yeah,
this
how am I doing so far?
I'm going to retire now, and Paul's going to take over the show. Cisco slashes as many 14,000 jobs, and you're saying it's 20 or 25% of their workforce.
That's what it said in their announcement. That's huge.
And the underlying reason for this is that Cisco's playing catch up. And I think they're late to the game in terms of cloud. And it states that in the article. It says the cuts were due in large part to the shift into cloud computing, which eliminates tech talent devoted to back-end operations. Cisco was late to enter the cloud market where it faced stiff competition from Amazon AWS and Microsoft Azure, which, I couldn't have put it better myself. So,
well, I mean, if I visited a large co-location, I don't know what to call it anymore. It's basically outsourced data centers. And I visited one of the big ones yesterday, and you can see that companies that historically have had their own IT operations have just gone all in with their own clouds or their own outsourced companies. And
you see that more and more, right? Like, why does a smaller company, especially ones that are, let's talk 50 people or less, why do they have to have their own data center? I mean, the staffing to maintain your own data center today, why wouldn't you just put it in the cloud or go to a private cloud hosting provider or another? These data center places are popping up all over the place too. So I don't know.
Well, the other thing we noticed was that these are big brand name companies that are moving faster. I think the big companies are moving faster towards this. The smaller companies have already outsourced a lot of it. I mean, they can't do it themselves anyhow. So, but what's interesting to me is that recently, a friend of mine works for TD Bank, and TD Bank just decided to outsource their IT to IBM.
Yep.
Also, right here in Rhode Island, Citizens Bank decided to outsource last year their IT to IBM. So
it was IBM, okay.
Yeah, and so those are the IBMs and the Wipros of the world are going after that business, and so that's really interesting to me because they virtually have gone from 700, 800, 1,000 IT employees down to maybe 100. So they still run their strategy, but they have a lot of people that are they actually go to work for IBM, which is not bad. It's not a career move.
Well, and I think it's changing the landscape of security as well. I don't think it impacts it in terms of making it lesser of a market. It just changes it, right? I mean, because the infrastructure that they have is not going away. How they staff it and where its resource is changing. So it doesn't really impact security, which is good for us.
Well, we also see with these big players is that they are all of a sudden they're acquiring security technologies for their systems because basically once they've outsourced the servers and the communications and all that, why not send the security over there too? So.
Right. There's still security that has to be done, no matter if you're outsourcing or not. Yeah, there's a lot of local stuff too. Ativo Networks and Carbon Black have partnered up. I had to read this like 3 times to figure out. We read all these press releases, Paul. John and I joke every. John couldn't be here this week, but he's on vacation and something with the Yellowstones. I don't know. He'll explain when he gets back. We're not quite sure if he's throwing Yellowstones or what he's doing. But so I had to read this 3 times to get that. It looks like Ativo Networks. You familiar with Ativo? I want to say it's sort of like virtualized honeypot kind of things. They're collecting information basically about bad things in your network, and they're partnering with Carbon Black so that when they find a bad thing, as I was talking about earlier, they can stop it. And this is just another example of where we're going. And I think a really smart integration, especially if you already have both of these products, this is definitely something to look into. In Ativo's Threat Matrix Deception and Response Platform. How's that for a name? That's some pretty good marketing terminology right there. We kind of poke fun at the marketing terminology, Paul, in this show.
Well, so do the CISOs. I mean, you talk to the CISO and it drives them nuts because they can't interpret it. They don't know what it means.
What exactly do you do? Right? Yeah, that's what we try to get to on this show. So I think this is good. I could be getting it wrong, but that's everything I get from the press release. And I'm familiar with the TiVo because they came on our Security Weekly show.
So how big are they then?
I'm not sure. I know sites that can tell you approximately how big they are.
Because this is
I don't want to give away all my. I don't want to give away my secrets on the show.
No. But if you look at this, as Carbon Black is probably about the same size as Forescout, right? Rapid 7. They're in the same neighborhood of companies, in terms of the size of the company.
Like what do you think they're doing for revenue, companies that size? I mean, they're between
50, 100 million, maybe over 100 million, but they're all in that.
No, they're not that high.
No?
No.
All right.
No, they're not 50 million.
Well, I don't know. I mean, all I'm saying is once they get over 50 million,
yeah,
what you're seeing is mid-sized companies, right? Because these are companies that are well established. They've been around, right?
I think
They
these
know.
are all, I think the Ativo and Carbon, I don't know. If I could log in to this thing that I use. Have you ever used Owler before? I'm giving away my secrets now.
No.
Yeah. Owler makes a revenue estimation for the company.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
I don't know how good it is. Apparently it's like crowdsourced, right? So if I go here, so we're looking at Ativo, right? And there's probably people listening who are at Ativo that are like, I know what our revenue figures is, and they're gonna correct us on it or not. So
Okay, they're
they're estimating 5 million.
Okay, smaller company. But that makes sense,
Carbon
too.
Black,
right?
I would guess, is bigger, and I know someone that was at Carbon Black sent us feedback on one of our other shows. Oh, you're right. Carbon Black is at
north
60
of
million.
50
yeah,
million,
so
right.
they're bigger. Okay, so this is a smaller guy going to a
Right, but once you
large
get
guy.
north of 50, you have to start thinking about going to the public markets. They're not available right now.
Yeah.
So what are all these guys doing? They're all trying to figure out how to get bigger, right?
We could do a whole show on how you go from 50 million to 100 million. I'm not sure how interesting that would be to some of our audience, but I'm just, in my own startup, we're not quite there yet.
But you got to think about it.
I can almost see that, right? But
you think about it from the standpoint of the CISOs are trying to rationalize their vendor. They had 7 vendors, now they have 27 vendors, right?
Right.
And so this helps in that they want to see companies align so that they know the stuff is committed to work, right? As opposed to say, we're going to throw it over the fence to you and you're going to make it work. Great. Thank you.
Right. In other integration, Kaspersky Labs and Logmain join up. This is a blending of an IT management company. Logmain is actually an IT management remote desktop, remote management company partnering with
weren't they just bought? by
Logmain?
Yeah, Logmain.
Were they?
Yeah.
Now we got to go to Owler.
It gets complicated.
It gets very complicated to navigate these waters. Is it going to be like this for how long?
I don't know, but
Log me in. I keep Logmain. Log me in.
yeah.
I'm an idiot. Wow.
Citrix.
So they're a big company. Yeah, their competitor is Citrix. They're about a 200.
Didn't Citrix just buy them? No.
No. It tells you their funding rounds because that is public.
Hang on.
Logmain funding. 2009, they took $100 million in funding. Oh no, they went IPO. Sorry, they went IPO in 2009. I don't think did Citrix buy them really?
Yeah. Logmein announced his merger with.
Log me in. I call it Logmain.
Well, they announced it as a merger, right? Because they're big companies, right? There you go. Logmein announced his merger. This happened
with Citrix.
Yeah.
And Citrix is Cisco, right? No.
Citrix is Citrix.
Citrix is Citrix. I'll get this right.
So it is a combine of equals, like 50% each, roughly.
Interesting.
Again.
So they were probably both $250 million revenue companies merging?
It says right here, run rate cost synergies of $65 million expected in.
I got you.
Well, no, that's $100 million. No, that's cost efficiencies. I don't know what the total.
What the revenue,
total would be $1.8 billion. Oh, that's the transaction value. So
I got you.
We'll catch up with
that's
this,
a valuation, which is always inflated, right?
But this is interesting what you're seeing, right? That this from a customer standpoint,
right?
You're seeing people start to knit this stuff together.
Yeah, so we're seeing traditional IT companies, IT management, IT operations, I should say, like Log Me In, merging with, or not merging, but doing integrations with or incorporating security technologies like an OEM kind of deal as well. So, and I think it's interesting how this plays out. Like sometimes it's an OEM, sometimes it's an integration, sometimes it's more of a loose partnership, sometimes it's an acquisition or merger between these two companies. But the point is we're seeing more of it. And I think, do you think it's going to shrink the security market?
In terms of number of vendors, but not in terms of the size of the revenues are going up. I mean, this is here it is here. Pro forma combined $1 billion plus. Mm-hmm. So, because they're up against the IBMs, the Ciscos, right, the HPs, right. So that's how they're looking at it, and then But this is interesting. It's not so the alignments, the partnerships, I think, are indicators of what you might see in the future too.
Yeah,
right?
There's definitely some trends here. It was interesting how I was able to pull some of these out of the news this week. So FortScale reveals new ways to detect insider threats. So their new product release consumes external threat feeds in search of compromised enterprise usernames and passwords. So this isn't new. And this isn't something you can't do yourself with open source tools and open source feeds either, which is kind of puzzling that they would kind of make a big deal about this at Fort scale. They've got some other things in there that are somewhat less interesting, such as they say they leverage new generic data sources to provide out-of-the-box support. I love that, out-of-the-box. Got to use that in your marketing, right? For several new data source types, including DLP, Secure Web Gateways, and Cisco ACS. My concern with this, if you're looking at Fort scale, is when any vendor says that they can take generic logs and then make sense of them so you can take action on them, be highly skeptical. Because the logging game, and John and I will probably do a whole episode on just like logs in general and how to make sense of them, and try not to talk. I think we did an episode on SIM, but just the challenges in looking at all those different data sources and applying that to taking an action, going from that point, like point A to point B, is so hard for so many reasons, right? I mean, first, there's so much data. Secondly, even a single source, like when you say Cisco ACS, the ACS platform has how many different versions of the operating system and how many different ways to configure logging. So that one platform has 16 different log formats that you have to parse. Programmatically, from a programming standpoint, that's incredible. I just lost my, it's back now. So that's incredibly difficult to achieve. So anyone that says they can accept logs from generic sources, be kind of skeptical about that, because it's tricky business.
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody's trying to solve this problem of too much data. So that's a good thing. But you're right, it's a difficult problem, and it only gets worse when you start to get involved with the stuff we're involved with, which is IoT and BYOD and all the things that you don't account for in your network.
It's another great transition, Paul. You're knocking them out of the park on this show.
Well, I'm just following this. The list.
He was like, that's the last story,
Right.
So I have to tie it to the, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. Yeah, because we're going to talk about, I called it detecting rogue in the enterprise. I don't know if your marketing people have, like, how do you define your market segment? Because you're like the only one in this kind of game, I mean, that's really invested this much into detecting rogue, basically, in devices, right?
Right. Well, yeah, it starts with detecting everything, which a lot of CISOs say, well, why should I care about all this stuff, right? It's just sort of out there floating around.
Right.
Some of it
What's
drives
the problem
by
I'm
your
trying to
building.
solve? Right?
Well,
that's
according
Michael
again,
Sant'Arcangelo.
right.
We're channeling him. Right?
Well,
Let's start. I mean, we can start there, right? Like, what's the problem?
The bet is that this is where the attacks are going to come from, and we decided to go in this direction 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, and put the platform out last year. But Gartner just came out earlier this year and said, yes, this is where the attacks are going to come from. So,
well, attackers, for being a penetration tester, right? And if you look at some of the attack trends, they take the path of least resistance.
Exactly.
And as other technologies get better at detecting attacks, I mean, and I know we tend to pick on vendors, we tend to pick on security technologies, and talk about their shortcomings, like I just did with SIM, and like I just did with a number of other technologies. But the fact of the matter is, the choices that we have and the solutions that we're implementing today are giving us better visibility into our standard network, my laptop, our computers, the server, the web applications, the things that we normally think we have to secure. I do really believe, to put my optimist hat on, right, that we're getting better at that. And the attackers, of course, are going to notice this trend. I mean, there's got to be 40 different endpoint protection vendors. And
there's a whole new breed of them now, too, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Lighter
There's
weight
always
and
a whole new breed of endpoint protection all the time. But even if those solutions aren't perfect, they're still making it more difficult for attackers. And so when you're an attacker and you start looking at, well, what vectors are easy now we're looking at Bluetooth, wireless, and some of these other attacks that can be more successful now, because this is an area that companies really aren't looking at. I want to make this blanket statement. I don't ever believe that there was a moment in time where everyone kind of realized that, hey, I need to protect this wireless thing from rogue devices, the Bluetooth and Zigbee. Like, I don't think we've reached that point. I think some of the industrial control systems have worked to maybe secure their own communications, and as a cursory to that, like, yeah, we should worry about rogue devices. But most enterprises, I mean, I don't really see it bubbling up. They're concerned about all the things that we've been concerned about over years, and maybe mobile makes it up into their kind of new technology they have to worry about securing. But I don't think they've worried, and I don't know, you tell me, what are you hearing from customers as far as in potential customers and analysts about how worried are people about the rogue threat, especially as it pertains to different wireless technologies?
Well, they're seeing, we surveyed them, and we've seen Gartner do some work and some others do some work around this, which is, and we've actually talked to Verizon about this, because the detection stuff that we all get today comes from the products that we have, right? So we detect it when it shows up, but maybe it started someplace else. And so organizations now are starting to worry about Bluetooth and Wi-Fi devices that they don't own and control, that they can't manage because, and so
and that's the gap, right?
Right.
What I don't know is what's going to hurt me, and in this case, what I don't know is those. So I gave you a story before, and I want you to comment on this. This is a good friend of mine, Josh Wright, renowned wireless researcher, told me a story probably 6 or 7 years ago, or more, and said, I did a pen test once. I got a Bluetooth access point. I went into the organization, into their waiting room or wherever. Every place bigger places have a public place where you can go walk in and wait for whatever. And I found an outlet.
The dry cleaners does.
I found an outlet and a network jack, and I plugged in, and I went in the parking lot and went undetected for a whole week, gaining access to this organization.
Right.
And what exists today to detect a Bluetooth access point? I mean, we have WIDs, right? But there are all these different wireless communications now.
Well, and Bluetooth will get extended range too, and there's so many devices coming on the marketplace. We're now seeing a regular flow of customers saying that they see things being plugged in, and it worries them because they couldn't see it before, and they couldn't see where the attack emanated from, because it could have started in the parking lot, and it shows up when it shows up wherever they detect it, but they can't see where it started from. And part of thinking about this is to think about, well, wait a minute, it's layers of security. Okay, fine, you have the trust zones, you can do all kinds of things to authenticate people and so on and so forth. But these things are very friendly, and they talk to everything around them, right? So how are you going to deal with that problem? And it makes most people's heads hurt because they already have too much data.
Yeah.
So this is a problem that's coming, and yet we see some resistance to, well, wait a minute, let me just get my house in order here, and I'll deal with that when it happens. Well, it's already happening, right? We've seen 55% of our clients have told us that they see attacks from mobile devices, 38% from wireless devices, right? So that's already happening. They couldn't see it before, right? So, and I think that you just look at the numbers, right? There'll be people talk about 20 billion devices by 2020, or you'll see 40 billion, whatever the billions are. Most people will say to us, they see that as, well, that's the refrigerator at home and the lamps and the doorbells and all this kind of a thing. No, it's not. 7 billion out of the 20 billion are in enterprises, or in industrial, almost 2 billion in industrial, and about almost 5 billion in enterprises, right? So what are those things, right? And what they're doing is they're sort of saying, BYOD devices, it's all rolling into IoT. So when you say IoT, to a lot of people, they think consumer device. But now, for the first time I see this year, people actually starting to say, well, wait a minute, no, the millennials I'm hiring, they come to work, everything's strapped onto them. They come with 3 or 4 things that are communicating. And guess what? They feel free to connect to whatever's out there. They don't really, they could do that at home, they could do that at school, so why can't I do that at work? And if I'm not going to come work for you if you don't let me bring my stuff, right? So that's the phenomenon that's happening. I think we're starting to see that manifest itself. That was the play. We just looked at, a lot of people look at the market and they say, okay, how do I fit my technology into the marketplace? And so you have to find a way in. And what we did was we looked at it and we said, well, wait a minute, things are going to change. That's the way in for us. And so we're taking advantage of that change.
You and everyone at Pwnie Express must love the show Mr. Robot.
They like us too.
I mean,
evidently they want to have us on the show.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, because the security issues that they're exploiting on the show.
Yep.
I'm trying not to give away the plot line for those that may have not. If you haven't watched it, you got to go watch it. The security holes that they're exploiting are very much the same ones that your products are addressing.
Right.
In that space. I mean, everything from Raspberry Pis being plugged in the network to the femtocell intercepting cellular communications.
Right.
I won't tell you where that fits in the plot, but just know that that's in there. But in the people that are advising for the show, some of whom we know very well, are pulling from real life and putting it into the show. So at the end of the day, these are real hacks, and they're modified slightly for TV, but it is by far the most realistic depiction of attacks and hacking that has ever been shown on film or TV. But a lot of them are devices, because going in the front door creates a lot of noise. It's difficult, so we got to get something on the network. We have to get a device there.
Right. It's also for TV. It's also a lot more visible. I mean, the thing about devices is we can look at them and talk about them. And like the guy at Black Hat that was hacking the door lock systems. Going into your house. Right. 14 out of 16, I think he broke. Right there.
Right.
And it's so these things are creeping in. They're already there. We see it in terms of industrial, not just when you look at industrial, look at IoT, people are now counting the HVAC system is in. That's wireless, right? Hospitals have devices that are wireless. We had one hospital talk to us and say, yeah, we bought 5 CAT scan machines. We can only find 2 of them. But can your stuff help us find them? Well, yeah, we find everything. So, of course we can.
How do you lose a CAT scan machine?
Well, because...
Is it a mobile one? Is there such thing
they're
as
on
a
wheels.
mobile?
Everything's on wheels.
There is a mobile CAT scan machine. I know there's mobile X-ray and ultrasound machines. My wife works in the medical imaging space.
Right.
There is a mobile CAT scan device.
Well, all these
you don't get a mobile MRI. That has a room and it doesn't move. That thing's too big. If you lose an MRI machine, now we're in real trouble.
But they're all on wheels. They all move.
Except for the MRI.
Yeah.
Because that's a big magnet.
No, you're right.
That would be
That's true. Yeah.
All the...
But heart pumps, scanners, all kinds of medical devices are on wheels. They move around, right? So, and so that's. But the problems are not just security problems. They're problems of knowing what you have, what you don't have, knowing what it's doing, knowing what it's connecting to. If you're in the IT group, you've been asked to give the medical device people, just give them internet access, give them connection, give them bandwidth, whatever. You're left out of it. No, we don't need your help.
But you must get this too, because I've run into this where organizations are like, I already have too much stuff on my plate. If you tell me more about things that I don't know about, you're creating more work for me that I can't do. You must get that a lot as well.
It makes you. I had a CISO of a major company say to me, "Why should I care about all this stuff?" And I said, "You shouldn't actually. It's as a vendor." And I think it's for all of us in the business, we have to figure out how to do the job for them and not overwhelm them with data. So we're trying to take on this challenge of identifying devices and categorizing them and finding the good ones and the bad ones, and do that for you so that you don't have to think about it, right? So before we ship more data to SIMs, we're trying to narrow that down so we can ship you actionable data. So that's the trick, and I think. We're starting with that as a premise, whereas a lot of the organizations that are already in place, as stuff proliferated, they have to now think about how to deal with that problem. So,
and now your solutions, Paul, and I know a lot of people ask me this question. We talk about Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and Zigbee, and those are for the most part pretty well defined. And there are some variations, but they're well defined radio spectrums and protocols that operate there. But your products also have the capability to support really any protocol with the user-defined radio. Is that creeping into the enterprise, or is that still a hobbyist kind of project right now?
That's we're playing around with that. I mean, it's easier for us to put in place hardware that is designed to detect Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and so on. So, but our goal long term is to do it all. And so we're playing around with, do we do it in hardware? Do we do it in software? I mean, software-defined radios are there, but to make it all work and deliver it for a very low cost and make it scalable and all that, it's really hard to do that with SDR. So that's how we think about it. And to think of it from this standpoint, most people today are worried about, they don't have an understanding of the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth in their organizations today.
Yeah,
so just
you're
to get them
making their heads explode when you talk about wireless keyboards and the proprietary protocols.
Yeah. So that's, and the attackers will use as you said, they'll take the easiest path. So they'll look for a user that's vulnerable. It's all still social engineering. The thing that's nice about the devices is they help social engineering people do.
Well, and I think Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are good to pick on because I always like to think we're going to be in a situation where it doesn't require an attacker's physical presence. When we talk about attacking these protocols, right? If I'm going to attack Wi-Fi, I need to be in some proximity. I mean, I can be pretty far away, but I can't be in Russia and break into the Wi-Fi in a company here in the U.S. unless I can find a user who has devices that have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth that I can basically Trojan their devices that I know that they're going to go into that system. Now, I can't say that I've seen attacks like that, but my guess is that's where it's going, right? If we look at how Stuxnet was deployed, it was the contractors and people they know that will be going to that facility. They Trojaned their their computers with Trojan USB thumb drives, which went on the systems. I think the next evolution of that is Wi-Fi devices that we use that attackers are going to turn into attack tools to make this attack remote.
Yeah. Well, I have it in my pocket here someplace. The wireless keylogger.
Yeah. Oh, that's a wireless keylogger.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, you plug this into a computer, and these are pretty much invisible. So, and it looks like...
So it sits in line, but it snips wirelessly, not through the USB. Is what you're saying? It just gets
No. It's logging the key strokes.
I gotcha.
But the bad guy connects to this.
Connects to it wirelessly.
Right. And he extracts it that way. Just like what you see happening in gas stations, they're using Bluetooth credit card skimmers, right? So they put we used to think, well, they put it in, then they have to go retrieve it.
Yeah,
they don't have to retrieve it
now
anymore.
It's wireless.
So,
or it's NFC as well.
Yeah, and certainly, certainly the nation states certainly have enough people on the ground here to activate, whatever they want, right? Correct. So people do sit out. So we do see people sitting outside of buildings trying to detect things, and the companies flip out because they're like, well, I didn't know, I know this was possible, but I didn't know they were actually there.
Right.
So but there are other things, Paul, that are really practical things. So, for example, we did a job with Super Bowl 50, and they were worried.
Yeah, tell me. So you guys were at the Super Bowl for all intents and purposes. You didn't get a ticket?
Said, did you get to go?
Yeah.
No, you don't get to go. You sit in your little. I saw John in the whatever he sits in, that little cubicle out in outer space, wherever he is, the little white cubicle.
Exactly.
So anyhow, you sit wherever you sit. But what we did was we baselined the stadium, and we were able to actually identify all the MAC addresses of all the devices that we're communicating.
Right. But wireless devices.
Yeah, but in particular, they have a wireless ticket scanning system. So you go into a stadium, you go into any show today, they scan your ticket. So those are 802.11, right? And if somebody wants to mess with that, it would cause a lot of problems. So as people start to use wireless as part of the critical infrastructure to do things, right? It might be nice to kind of monitor those things to figure out if somebody's trying to mess with those, right? So you could have them encrypted, you got them all done the right way, but they can still be hacked.
Because it's wireless.
Right, and so, or your access points. We saw out at Black Hat a Karma attack happening, and so somebody put up an access point, a TP-Link access point, and they put evil AP, and they were able to spin out within a couple hours. I think they had 600 SSIDs.
Wow! So
whatever SSIDs were being pinged out by the phones, they were picking up, and then those phones were connecting to them if they were in proximity to that. So, and that was happening right at Black Hat, and we're the only ones that saw that. So these things are happening, and you might want to know about it, right?
Right.
Even if you don't know what to do about it.
Well, because it's what you don't know that's likely going to hurt you the most. So, well, that's awesome. Yeah, I like that the Super Bowl. That's pretty cool that you guys were there, had that opportunity. The stuff on your roadmap, Paul, do you have a new product release? Or I know you just released the Pwnie Pad 4.
Right, we still do the devices. We have the Pwnie phone and the Pwnie Pad, and we update those because the devices update. We never update with the latest phone or pad because it's impossible to do that. And then we have what's called the Pwnie Plug R4. It's the fourth version of the Pwnie Plug.
Right.
And those things get more powerful. We try to keep it small and stealthy and low cost. And then we also have the Pwnie Pro. So all that stuff. So we have 2 fixed devices, 2 mobile devices, and they all connect to the Pulse Cloud system that we use to collect all this, sort it out, and show you where the problems are. So it's pretty cool. If you're in the consulting business and you're doing penetration tests, everybody likes to have one of these in their pocket. But if you have a consulting organization that's doing a big job, it gives you some way to aggregate that stuff. If you put the devices out there, you can actually you don't have to go on site, which is kind of cool.
Right.
So you take the scarce resource. You don't have enough of these guys to begin with. You take them and you give them access to maybe 100 locations, and they can do what would take them a year to go travel around and do.
Right.
So I kind of call it Pwnie Plug on steroids. But that's so Pulse is
the
being
consulting
used.
model applies to what you're doing, but also any organization can benefit by deploying the sensors and aggregating the information.
Right. So we're focused on the big problem, the big cloud that's out there, which is rogue devices, the proliferation of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. But at the same time, underneath the covers, we've kept all the tools that people know and love, and that's what gives the ability to respond, on a very surgical basis if you see something happening. So
That's awesome.
Yep.
Very cool. Well, that concludes Enterprise Security Weekly for today. I want to thank our special guest, Paul Paget, CEO of Pwnie Express. You can find all their products at pwnieexpress.com. Thanks, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you next week.